Hello, everyone. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I'm Dr. Pebbles Turbyville, the CEO of Horses and Humans Research Foundation. And I just want to let you know that we're here about exploring, explaining, and educating people about the connection between horses and humans, as well as supporting the research that helps both thrive. So with that little small introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Kaufmann, who's our host today for the panel.
Thank you very much, Pebbles. It is great to be with you guys, Horses and Humans Research Foundation. Love it. Have been working with you guys for a while. I am here in New York State at a school called Green Chimneys. I am the director of our farm programs. It's a residential treatment school for children. For many years, I've been involved in therapeutic horsemanship and animal welfare. And so it's a real delight to host this particular topic. We have a fantastic panel that will introduce themselves shortly. And we are going to be spending the next hour talking about horses, their role, their shifting perceptions towards horses. We have a very knowledgeable audience, so we are really already starting with people who kind of know this stuff. Many of you could be on the panel, and in a way you are on the panel because we are going to have some chatting and some conversation back and forth, and that's hopefully going to happen, and we're going to leave lots of room for that. This is not a PowerPoint-based presentation. We're not going to go around, and show slides and lecture. It's really much more discussion-based. The way we're going to do it is we're going to discuss different questions. Not every panelist has to answer every question necessarily. And audience participation, of course, is encouraged. We do want to say it's going to have a North America bias, United States bias, although we're aware that there are people joining us from other parts of the world, and that horses live in all parts of the world, and some of the things that may be true in Europe or in North America may not be true in other places. But I think there's hopefully going to be some learning for everybody. And without much ado, why don't we go and have the panelists briefly introduce themselves? It's not going to be a lengthy introduction, but they're going to tell you a little bit about who they are, what they do. And the one question I would like each of you to answer in your introduction is, what is the first equine experience that you had, the first time you spent time around horses or worked with horses in your life? And I'm just going to pick Julie Broadway. Why don't you go first?
Thanks, Michael, and hello, everyone. It's an honor to be part of this panel, and I totally agree with Michael that many of you are got way much more knowledge than I might even on this subject. But I'm Julie Broadway. I'm president at the American Horse Council. We're a Washington, D.C. based advocacy organization that works on behalf of the equine industry. We focus on federal, legislative, and regulatory issues and industry initiatives. So when the industry can coalesce around something we think we need, we are often asked to kind of stand up those programs. So we do lots of interesting things like our United Horse Coalition, which works with horse owners who find themselves in difficult situations and they need resources to keep their horses at home instead of surrendering them perhaps to a rescue. We have a microchip lookup tool. We work very closely with the Equine Disease Communication Center, and the list just goes on and on. With that, I will just say at this point, Michael, to your question, my first experience with a horse, believe it or not, was twofold. One, when I was very young, I had a cousin who had horses at home, and I visited with them and had an opportunity to engage with a horse. But my real passion for horses did not occur until I was a little older in middle school, and my parents made the fatal mistake to send me off to 4-H camp, where my elective was horseback riding. And I came home totally smitten and said, this is the life for me. And I spent 20 plus years in corporate America doing horses on the side and took on greater and greater leadership roles in the horse industry. And from there, I segued into leading a breed association and then came to the American Horse Council in 2016. So that's my story, Michael.
And what was the breed association?
I was at the Morgan Horse Association for about
That is correct. Thank you very much, Julie. Graham, why don't you go next? You're on mute. Yep.
Okay, yeah, no, thank you, Michael. Hi, my name is Graham Green. I'm from the UK. My thanks to Pebbles and the team at HHRF for this opportunity to be on this esteemed panel this afternoon. Yeah, so I'm a director in the UK of Athena Herd Foundation, so I'm the token non-North American here on the panel this afternoon. And Athena Herd Foundation has been working in the UK since middle of the 2010s. It was founded on really essentially the well-being of the animals that keep there, including the horses that now live there. And essentially is what it has done, it has developed into the space, into the world of equine assisted services, and it has been providing both training and services since 2018 in the local community. But what we have now developed, we train internationally, so we train online and we train face-to-face, we travel and we deliver through online services. And essentially where we have now moved forward to is that we are now running the only UK-based independent regulated register supporting the work of equine practitioners and other animals. So we're really trying to get proper independent governance in the UK behind the interventions for health and social care in this space. So to Michael's question, my first equine experience in my life, I'm not a lifelong equestrian. My first equine experience was probably around about 25 years ago. And essentially when my children were very small, I was getting up at some ungodly hour on a Sunday morning to take them for riding lessons. And someone suggested to me, actually, why don't you have a lesson? And I couldn't think of a reason why not. And my life changed thereafter, hence why I'm probably here today. So thank you, Michael. That's me.
Thank you very much, Graham. I appreciate that. Brooke USA, you're on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Doolin, and I'm the CEO of Brook USA Foundation. Brook USA Foundation is dedicated to alleviating the suffering of working equines in developing communities across the world and improving the lives of those who depend on them. So I am also, like Graham, not on the American field of things because I focus in developing nations across Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. Also a funny comment, Graham, I happen to be British as well. I was born in the UK of a British mother, which ties in directly to my first experience with a horse. I was probably about 4 years old, and like a good Brit, my mom took me to a stable and had me ride a horse, and I jumped down and said, "No, mommy, never again." And it actually defined my life because I am not an equestrian, although I love horses, but I'm an animal welfare specialist. For the last 25 years, I've been working in animal welfare, not always with horses, and living in Miami, Florida. I've worked at Jungle Island, which was a zoo attraction. I worked for the Humane Society of Greater Miami. I volunteered for the South Florida FPCA, for Pelican Harbor, for Paws for You. So I'm an all-around animal girl, which means that I do care about the welfare of horses, although I don't ride.
Very good. And your first experience with horses?
4 years old, as I told you, when my mom took me to meet one.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
I jumped off and said, no, but
No,
I
no.
want to feed it,
Okay.
mommy. I want to feed it.
Wonderful. And Miyako, do you want to go next?
Hi everyone. So I'm the last minute sub to this group, and my name is Miyako Kinoshita, and I currently work for Green Chimneys where Michael is, and I am assistant director. And I came to Green Chimneys after my financial career to pursue, these humans and animals and, what it means, the relationship and the healing power. So I came here to explore it. And for 13 years, I taught equine program. And now I get to do a little bit bigger, like a picture work with adults and adults who work with students and animals. So like I've been here for about 26 years. And I am also not a lifelong equestrian in a sense that where I grew up in Japan, horses were not readily accessible or the farms were not accessible. So I always dreamed of them in books and stuffed animals. And the first real horse that I actually interacted with was when we had a family trip to a remote island. They had a native, tiny native Japanese horses on the island that were free roaming. And we drove by and we walked by, and that was my first horse experience.
Thank you, Miyako. And certainly not least, but last of the panel, Dr. Mike Tomlinson. We are not hearing you.
Much easier if I unmute myself.
Yes, yes.
Good morning from Southern California. I think your question's a great place to start. I I was a barn rat. There was a rent string near me, and I ended up living there in the late 60s. So been working with horses a little while. In '84, I was a treatment vet at the LA Olympics. And so I've been working with high-level performance horses ever since then. I do not work on track horses. I've been doing the World Equestrian Games. I've been doing the Paralympics ever since then. My work really with the assisted equine assisted services started in the early 90s when I wanted to give back, and I found the best way to give back to the community was by using my veterinary knowledge to help that. I also figured out that if I'm going to be gone for 3 or 4 weeks at these events, that I can't have a regular practice. So I've had a referral practice since then, and I've been back in business. I did a lot of startups. The one most horse people know about is Smart Pack Equine or Game Ready Equine. Those are the two biggest. Did a feed company in Australia, worked in Europe. So my viewpoint is much more world centric rather than just USA centric, and done a lot of work with the horses. Like she said, Brook USA is a tremendous promoter of working horses, and I've done a lot, not with them, but independent with them with working horses. So animal welfare is kind of what I've done for the last couple of decades, and now do an awful lot with human welfare, such as tomorrow I'll be at MDRIA conference. So
Very good. Thank you. Thank you all. So we're going to be talking about shifting perceptions on horses. And before we do that, I thought it interesting to remind us of the Zoetis equine industry survey that they sponsor every few years. It was last published in 2021, and they poll equine horse owners across the United States as to what are their most biggest issues facing the equine industry. And in the last survey, by far land use issues were cited as the biggest issue, followed closely by horses, horse transitions, and horses at risk. Horse keeping was the third largest issue that equine owners felt confronted them, and then followed by animal rights activists, competition costs, liability, and overregulation. So that just sort of places us in the picture. Now, sort of a different thing I looked into in 1925, so 100 years ago, there were 22 million, almost 23 million horses and mules in the United States. And according to the American Horse Council, in this decade, there's about 7 point something million. So my question to all of the participants, and use your chat, is where do you see the number of horses 100 years from now in the United States? So take a minute, put your number into the chat. I'm not going to give you a full minute. I'll give you maybe 10, 15 seconds.
So Michael, if it's of any help, when we did our last economic impact study, we had moved from 7.2 million to 6.5 million over the course of the last about 5 or 6 years.
All right, that tells us something. So as people are putting their numbers in, I want to quickly open it to the panel. Panel, where do you see us in 100 years in the United States with horses? Significantly less. We've had guesses 3 million, dwindling. Large mammals will have a tough time in climate change. 1 million 100 years from now. Good question. 4 million, 2 million, 1 million. One panel, what do you think?
So,
Anybody jump in?
So I recently read an article about the horse industry, and the number of horses across the developing world will continue to decline. But what we will see is new countries emerging with a new horse industry. And it quoted actually Eastern Europe, especially Hungary, Poland, and Russia. And then it said Asia, South America, and even parts of Africa. So I think there's going to be a shift, particularly in the equestrian world, with a decrease in the US, but a larger population in other countries used specifically for equestrian sports.
Thank you, Emily. Others on the panel?
Well, I see the number of horses declining throughout the world, mainly due to space and economic reasons. And I don't see that changing. I think the number of people in the world will continue to rise. Therefore, the number of horses will continue to decline. I also see that the cost, because of that, is causing people to not be able to continue competing. So the number of backyard horses is plummeting. But I think that the benefits of horses is only now beginning to be seen. And because of the increased benefits, I think the role of the horse will be changing from a sport to almost a social necessity.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Which leads us into this question, which gets us to the heart of what the topic today is. Public perception of equines, and actually animals in general, and their consciousness and sentience is changing. So we find ourselves increasingly challenged to consider how they feel, their senses, how they see the world around them. And what does that actually mean in our relationship to them? And of course, we have all kinds of companion animals in addition to horses, dogs, others. And of course, there's animals across the globe. So I guess the question is, what exactly is shifting, and what do you think is driving the shift? Is it science-based? Is it emotion-based? Is it both?
I would say, Michael, that I feel like it's both. It's definitely a topic that I hear presented a lot and discussed a lot in the equine industry in the US. I do think Mike is right in that we're going to see continue to see some declines in the population, but we are seeing growth in very specific sectors, like the equine assisted services sector is just booming over the last few economic impact studies that the American Horse Council has done. But we're seeing the racing sector and some of those other sectors that Mike pointed out, we're seeing them decline. Interestingly enough, we've seen breed registrations really fall off during the Great Recession. But in our last study, which came out in 2023, we're seeing a rebound in some of those areas. And I contribute that to this renewed and greater increase in the human-animal bond and interaction
I would certainly, I would agree with both Mike and Julie there in terms of actually being, in terms of being part of the equine assisted services and marketplace. So we're definitely seeing, a much big, here in the UK, we're seeing many over the last 10, 15 years, we've certainly seen a big uptake in the provision and the training of this service. So it's definitely something that people are engaging with. And as you say, it is changing how we shift. But I think to your question, what's driving this shift in perception? I think there is a mixture of both science and popular reading. So I think, in terms of we're starting to see a lot more understanding from science about recognizing actually not just what it is for a horse to be a horse, but for any animal to be an animal. This idea, if you like, that ethologists call the umwelt of an animal. What is the feeling like for a horse to be a horse? We can't actually know that, but we are beginning to recognize that that is an important thing. So I think there is this shift. There is definitely work being done in the scientific community to support that. But that is also beginning to filter down now, and you're seeing a lot of popular science literature and perhaps even things like films and things going out through things like Netflix with things like My Octopus Teacher and things like that. The people or the human population is becoming increasingly aware of the sentience of animals. And I think that is driving a change in our perception of how we view animals.
I think that I would like to add, I completely agree. And then, we hear it all the time, that social media and easy access to information that are science-based and correct, but are also very, incorrect, very subjective. Those information are out there and they're all together reshifting the public opinions.
So having horses, being recognized as more sentient and having research to back up the emotional lives of animals, there's a gap that I see between the legal protection of animals currently, the legal protection of horses especially, and of course, across the world, that varies significantly in how animals are or are not protected. In the United States, state by state, there are different laws at play. Some states protecting horses almost as companion animals, others they are much more classified as livestock. Emily, any thoughts on that with a more global perspective? Where is the animal well-being, welfare, legal protection in regard to what we know about their sentience?
So I think that the improvement of their lifestyle is an economically smart thing to do. It's also what I consider socially just. Now, how do we do that in communities that are so different than what we do? So we have to learn how to see the world or see their world through a different prism. We can't see it with our own eyes. And here's really where cultural sensitivity plays a huge role. We need to be able to talk at their level rather than look at things the way that we see them in the US. So when we talk about animal welfare in the developing world, we look at several things like animal health. How can we provide veterinary training? Second, how do we educate owners so that they're better owners and are able to assist their animals? How do we empower communities to create equine clubs in schools, to have women work with their animals better? And how do we prepare these animals for disaster? Because when that happens, they're not only at risk, but they're also the lifeline to food and water. So I think that the most important thing is when you're looking at the general world, what you need to do is really look at them through a different eye and be able to talk to them. The most important thing to do is to listen and understand. So when we talk about our own work in equines and cruelty, these people do not treat their animals cruelly. It is actually based on lack of knowledge, ignorance, and lack of access to veterinary care. So it's a complete different mindset than what we are accustomed to. Do we want to see their lives improved? Absolutely, we do. But the way that we do that is very different. We need to focus on the fact that what can we do to improve this animal's health so he's a better contributor to that household? Very different than what we do in the US.
Anyone
It's
at the panel want to jump, Mike?
oh, I so concur with what you're saying. I look at $1 million jumper in Europe, and then I look at a pony in Nicaragua, and I can tell you the owner of the pony in Nicaragua loves that horse 100 times more because their life depends on it.
With them. Mhm.
The difference is the resources which are available to that horse or pony. And the equitability of that is what's very different. What I would say is that we're going to see a lot fewer of the horses that are pasture ponies. We're going to see a lot fewer of the horses that are $1 million jumpers, but we're going to see a lot more of the horses that are owned by a single family, and that's their lifeline. Because if we can provide them more resources, the people have a
Absolutely.
better life, the horses have a better life. And that's where
Exactly.
we're headed, I hope.
And we need to do
I
it with
can see.
compassion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Graham?
I just picking up on what Mike said. I completely concur with both what Mike and Emily have said. I think there is this importance about cultural sensitivity, and it's about our journey. You know, we are where we are in 2025, but you know, you quoted us some statistics of horses in America 100 years ago. The life for the horse in America 100 years ago was a very different one. Again,
Exactly.
it was much more part of the economic viability of a family or a community, essentially having and caring for its horse. And I do think that it might have been tougher and maybe more brutal in its life, sometimes perceived from the outside. But I think that point of there was love and care and understanding for those horses in a very different way to what we have them today.
Absolutely.
And I think there is actually something to learn there.
Yeah, I find it interesting also how change happens around us, and we are right in the middle of change. And having been here at Green Chimneys for 20 years, Miyako, maybe you can very briefly talk about in our therapeutic horsemanship program in the last few years, how has our perception of horses changed practice?
Yeah, I think that's a really big question. But like so when I first came and what I did for years, really therapeutic writing equestrian work. And we have 200 students, we have about 20 horses, like not everybody rides all the time, but like it was mainly mounted work. But at the foundation of it, it was always the relationship. Like the students who have disabilities, students who have social issues, what was most important was the relationship they built with horses. And last few years, we increasingly witnessed that when students are taking care of horses, that's when they're building relationships. They're really benefiting from, like working with horses. And horses also benefit from, like that kind of interaction being taken care of and it really, like participating in that setting. And riding itself, although it is a great sport and great thing for certain, like animals and certain people in this setting, it was very stressful. We saw the signs of horses, like really not being happy or just putting up with it, not thriving, and like we witnessed that in a barn, in arena, and burnouts. And we really were convinced in the last year or two that, like we can have much better quality program with horses when horses are here working with students in a way that they feel more comfortable and they are more willing to participate. Like it really, we stopped riding horses here last fall, and we see very different behaviors in horses. They are more relaxed. They approach people, like they hang out with their own, like heart in different ways. So, and I feel like, the science and more awareness of horse behavior and their stress and their quality of life really made a huge change for us. But I think that, like we're very happy with what we did, and we see clear difference in horses, like as we did that.
Thank you, Miyako. Really putting on my non-facilitator hat, what really pushed us to was the need that we felt to be congruent with some of the language that we use in our field, that the horses are partners, that we partner with the horses, we listen to the partners, and at some point we started asking ourselves, are we really listening to our horses? Are we really hearing what they're saying? What also came into it is that there was pressure from the outside, people coming in, seeing some of our students pulling on the reins in a funny way, or maybe kicking a horse too hard, and us getting pushback. And that sort of brought social license to operate to our attention. And I want to open that topic up briefly. Who would like to take a stab at explaining what the social license to operate is for those who may not yet have heard of that term?
I'm happy to give it a go, Michael, if that's
Oh,
always to kick
please,
the ball
Graham,
off.
please, please.
So essentially, it's one of those things. Actually, started out in the coal and mining industry, with a view to actually, is this an industry that people want to be involved in? How does the world feel about this? And social license to operate is about the pressure that communities around us bring to bear on our businesses. And there are actually sort of three elements of it. There's this idea of legitimacy, credibility, and trust. And it's essentially this idea of, are we legitimate to really be doing what we're doing? Are we reflective of the community that we're serving? Credibility. Does the community around us actually support the idea that we are doing what we say we're doing? Are we a voice that they are willing to listen to? Do they respect us for what we are offering to that discussion, or any discussion, or a service? And actually, it's about trust. The last and most important bit, it's about trust. Are we walking the talk? Are we actually following through on what we're talking about? Are we not just are we speaking the right things, but are our behaviors reflecting what we say we should be doing? And Michael, I think that that plays back to your point about the changes that you've experienced and been following through at Green Chimneys from that external pressure. I think that's a really good example of how social licenses comes into play, and actually the importance of reflecting.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Graham. Any other panelists want to jump in on that topic?
Let me just say that I've been working for animal welfare for decades, and people ask me what has changed, the biggest change in that. The biggest change is I was fighting people when I first started, saying, you can't do that. They'd say, why? Now I have the public behind me saying you can't do that. And so much change is occurring now in such a good way. Earlier you mentioned governmental regulations, etc. And the government is always decades behind public. And so the changes which are occurring because of social license to operate are far quicker and far more important than anything a government ever does.
There's a flip side to this. And the flip side is that in our equine program, in our animal programs, we now are almost worried, because all it takes is someone taking a picture on the wrong day, taking a video, taking something we say out of context, posting it on social media, and we look terrible. We look horrible. And this can happen to any equine sport, any place where horses live or work, and it does regularly. And I guess one of the questions is, and anyone who works with horses in any kind of professional setting, whether it's nonprofit or profit, we are the equine industry. So are we approaching a tipping point with a sector of society thinking they know better than those with animal knowledge and experience, and who base their idea of how animals should be treated on emotion or perception rather than experience with horses or with actual knowledge about animals?
Really interesting question, Michael. There's no absolute answer to that, is there? But I think I would offer the suggestion that, the thing is that people will vote with their feet. And it's not so much about whether they're right or wrong in their perceptions. The problem is that their perceptions are their perceptions. And it's how wide, for example, there are very different disciplines under this umbrella of things equestrian or things equine. And if we're talking about equine assisted services, we're talking about very different things, the rodeos or the horse racing industry. So the thing, I think one of the questions is, will there be a, if you like, a public perception of the equestrian world per se, and will we all get lumped within that, or is there a way of beginning to distinguish between the different sort of work that's being delivered?
Dr. Mike?
No, I can tell you that the equestrian world is completely lumped into one bucket. If we cannot fight among ourselves, we have to help every equestrian, and we all have to improve. I don't think the end product is going to be a bad thing. I think that the equestrian world will become better because of the social pressure, but we need to guide it, not follow it. And we need to be proactive, not reactive. We cannot let the uneducated be our guide, but they are our guardrails. The uneducated are the ones that tell us that looks wrong, and we can't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. The challenge is a video of a horseshoer trimming a foot by many people will be deemed cruelty. How can they do that to the horse? That's terrible, because they absolutely don't know what they're looking at. And I see that on Facebook, on Instagram,
All the
TikTok
time.
every day. It must be terribly, Julie, I'm going to go your way. It must be terribly frustrating for sincere horse people in various groups and organizations that are doing their best to comply with laws, to try to adhere to high standards, best practices, that it just isn't good enough.
I just wanted to throw in, Michael, you wouldn't believe how many people call my office to tell me that they saw a horse with a mask over its face that they think is something that is a bad thing. And we're like, no, that's for their own well-being. But you're correct in that there are so many people out there who are not well informed about some of the practices that we have, that jump to a conclusion about what they think is right or wrong. So Dr. Mike is exactly right. It's all about being proactive and educating people.
For education.
And to Emily's point, putting it in terms they can understand.
Yes. The flip side question that one of you panelists provided me ahead of time is, how effective are we who work with horses self-monitoring and admitting to weak spots in our ranks? And I thought that was very interesting. I don't know which one of you put that one down. How are we doing, Emily, on that? Are we effective at self-monitoring and admitting to weak spots in our
Well, that's an
relationship?
interesting question for me, because I actually do not know much about what we do in the United States except for what I read. But I do think that when you look at what's being done in the developing world, we have very, very strict monitoring, evaluation, and assessment programs in place to measure the well-being and improvements in well-being in animals. And we have it all on dashboards with numbers and measuring condition and body condition and psychological profile of the horse. But I wanted to say something real quick on the issue of social license. I think that it is important that in global debates around social license, sometimes we exclude the voices of the global South. And I think that we have to ensure that equine owners, veterinarians, and advocates from developing regions are at the table helping shape those norms as well, because they're very different. And again, we talk about cultural sensitivity. So I think that we need to open the doors and become, again, more inclusive in the development of these laws, these regulations, and these views so that they become globally acceptable. And I think that that will make it easier as well.
Emily, I wanted to kind of piggyback on that. I'll just share with the group that when we conducted our last economic impact study, we really wanted to get a good handle on how many horses were on Native American lands. And they were not receptive to participating in our work. They had some very cultural sensitivities and did not feel comfortable at all providing that kind of data. Similar challenge with the Amish. So even
Absolutely.
with this, we've got pockets of cultural sensitivities that we have to be mindful about.
Well, we can talk later because I'm working now on 3 Native American lands.
I think I do agree. I think that the limitation of social license and what it does, it comes as a judgment and criticism, but like it doesn't offer any creative solutions or like things like that to help with the situation. And I hear that in Emily, like Emily's point, we need to be able to provide some solutions and ways to help people and communities. Otherwise, like the judgment itself is not going to like far enough.
So, we're bringing up really wonderful and very like deep topics. We have just an hour and 20 minutes left. We're not going to resolve a lot of this, but I appreciate the different directions and the points that are coming out. One of the big topics of the day that is coming actually through the zoo world, where they have started to do cooperative care with animals, where it is no longer simply wrestling the lion and giving it medication. We are now training the lion to come up through a reward-based training to get a shot willingly. And that has now bled over into companion animals, into dog training, into the horse world too, animal consent. The animal is a participant that has the option to opt out, which sounds very good and in some ways can be very concrete, but it's also rather vague because traditionally in the horse world, control is a big piece of working with the horse. And the partnership is not equal because we control the animal's life from birth to death in the big picture. So how do we give horses control and freedom of choice and at the same time within a framework of control? And I think there are some in the audience who could address that one very well, I'm sure. But any thoughts on that panel?
I think it's from an equine assisted services perspective, and I can really only speak from that equine assisted services perspective. What I see in terms of the work that we're doing with people from Athena is that people are much more sensitive to giving the horses choice in that interaction. So it's very much about interacting with horses at liberty and in spaces of their own, rather than always taking them into arenas and schools to actually undertake specific structured or shaped, shall we say, exercises. And certainly I'm beginning to see a lot of a more reduction of the bleed over of training methods, what we might call training methods, into human development or to human support. So again, it's about this. I think people are recognizing that actually we get, and I think it again comes back to what you've just observed, Michael, Miyoka, about changing at Green Chimneys as well, in terms of actually how your horses are changing their interactions with the young people you're working with by actually just doing that work on and spending time on the ground with them rather than doing that ridden work. So again, it's starting to think about where is the space for giving the horse or the equines some choice in that interaction. But I'm acknowledging that that's very much specifically for the world that I'm talking about, for equine assisted services.
So Horses and Human Research Foundation, of course, is very interested in data and in research, and a lot of the things we're talking about are opinions, feelings, thoughts, experience. In terms of research and horses and their being or their behavior, what don't we know? What are some things that would be helpful in this changing environment where people are relating to horses differently and in new ways or maybe in old ways? What do we need to know?
Feel like
And
you
maybe
queued, I feel like you queued me up. I'm sorry. I'm jumping
Okay.
in here as the panel.
Yeah.
go ahead, jump in.
I think, Michael, you pose a great question, and that's why the board at HHRF has decided that when we make a call for our big grant, not only do we want the researchers to be looking at the human, but we want them to be looking at the horse. So again, the research is about both beings and how we can help both thrive. And right now we have a call for an innovative grant for just the horse itself. So we're looking at both. So hopefully we'll have some answers in the future.
Thank you. Now we can let participants unmute themselves, right, Pebbles? That's possible?
Yes, but Emily had a point and I jumped
Okay.
in before
And
her.
Emily, you are next, and then anyone in the room who would like to jump in, it's your time. Emily?
So I think that there's a lot of research available, that what we don't do is collaborate and share. And I think that there are opportunities to build in those collaborations. For instance, Brooke in the UK runs a research department that actually has 5 indicators with over 200 sub-indicators that actually measure all type of things from food intake all the way to natural human behaviors like grazing and playing in the ground. So I think that one thing that I would like to call upon is shared collaboration when it comes to data and research that we do have available.
Thank you. Open floor. Who would like to address one or the other topic that we've been talking about, or thoughts that you might have?
Oh, I would like to, if I can. Molly
Molly
Sweeney.
Sweeney, please.
I'm very biased towards the horse. I'm the chair of the Equine Wellbeing Committee for HHRF. And my feeling is that it's the EAS world, I like to call it equine assisted stuff, is what's really going to save the horse. Because when we can let people know that when you're working with a horse, however you are working with the horse, where you can form a relationship and a bond, that there's healing that occurs on both sides. And we know there's healing with horses when we work with horses. There's a lot of research out there that'll say that, yes, this works. And we also know, actually recently, there's a therapeutic riding program that had a change in their horse management. And they brought in a new group of people, and they went to looking more carefully at how they were doing their horse management. And the exciting thing is, not only did it change everything about the horses, they no longer had horses biting and nipping, they no longer had behavior issues, but they saved like $100,000 a year in vet bills because they had happy, well-adjusted, well-managed horses. They were looking at the nutrition, supplements, were they giving useless supplements? They really went through entire horse management thing. And so if you want to motivate people for change, I think one, the fact that horses heal, no matter where they are. If your living depends upon it, and you have a healthy horse, or you're a high performance rider and you have a healthy horse, you're going to do better. And we do have research that shows that. So to me, it's within the EAS world that we are really going to be the future of the horse. And by promoting that horses help us heal, and my big question has always been, we know they do heal, but when will we come to a point, hopefully in the near future, where we can explain how that happens?
Thank you, Molly. Anyone else?
I'd like to make the comment.
Yes, and could you just say who you are?
My name is Emerson Gray, and I'm a veterinary social worker, and I'm also an ethical vegan. And my concern is when we continue to normalize that horses are objects for human use. So we have this commodification, and whether this is for entertainment or sport or transportation, it diminishes the horse's value as an independent sentient being. So when we talk sentience, we're going to have to address all those forms of commodities that horses are currently being placed in. It's as if you can't have sentience and respect that, but continue to do the things that we're doing to the horses. I think it's very different than focusing on horses' value for companionship and care, such as rescue, rather than for use.
Thank you for your input.
Mhm.
Thoughts? Anyone else? So where do we go from here? We have a very articulate argument made by Emerson just now, which of course quite a few people absolutely support. You know, the sentience of animals requires major reshifting and adjustment to systems that are in place, be it with farm animals, be it with wildlife, be it with horses, many other animals. Then you have the world that Emily and Mike talk about, the rest of the world, where situations and development are very different, and life circumstances for people are different, life circumstances for animals are different. In our own country, in Europe, we have traditional activities with animals, horses particularly, sports, other activities, recreational activities. How do we coexist? Who convinces whom of what? Do we just all go about our business and do what we do? Do we collaborate more, like Emily says, with research? That's needed. I don't expect anyone to have the answer, but that's the conundrum right now. Because for us here in our program, working with animals, and we do control their life, they are working animals. They are in a therapeutic context. We take excellent care of them, but we do. They are animals. Then we have the legal thing in the background. Animals in many places still are property, our property. So it all collides and creates for a very messy and diverse conversation, doesn't it? And maybe that's where we have to leave it, because we're not going to solve this today. But I think it's an important conversation to have. So I'm looking at my clock, and I'm going to give a concluding statement to each of our panelists to take us home. And if we're a little bit riled up and a little bit less than satisfied at the end of this hour, that's just fine, because sometimes that's the best way to leave a conversation. So Mike, closing statement.
Oh, if you want to rile people up, then what you do is you say that while you're arguing about horses being property here in some parts of the world, wives are still property. So attitudes are changing, things are getting better, and we have to continue to think globally, act locally. If you are doing something with your horse, think, can I do it better? If my grandmother was watching me right now, would I have to explain myself? And if you'd have to explain yourself, you're not doing it right.
Julie, closing thoughts.
So I'll jump in on what Mike had to say. I feel the role of horses continues to evolve. That's partially due because we're seeing urbanization and vast amounts of space becoming less available. We see the cost of ownership, which we started talking about at the beginning, and the care, social license to operate is definitely coming into play. So I definitely think there are shifting perceptions, and we all need to be mindful of those perceptions and the cultural sensitivities that go along with them.
Thank you. Emily.
Sure. I think that what I would like to do is kind of refer back to the question that was asked of us. Are these animals our partners or are they beasts of burden? And I believe that we've made incredible strides, certainly in the United States and developing nations, but we are seeing slow but progressive change in developing countries. I believe that horses are our partners. They're silent, they're strong, they're resilient, and they walked beside us, and they've done it for centuries. But it's now our time to walk beside them. We need to offer them care, dignity, and support. So our goal at Brook USA is to transform communities into more compassionate, more respectful, and more sustainable partners. Does that mean that it's going to be fixed from one day to another? It's not. Little tiny steps accomplish great goals. But true progress in my mind moving from this binary concept of partner versus beast of burden. In developing worlds, equines can be both. There are essential workers. We can't live without them. If they're not there, we can't survive. There's no water, there's no firewood, there's no kids going to school, but they're also beings who deserve care. So I think that respecting that and working collaboratively across cultures is kind of the key to this whole relationship thing.
Emily, you're getting huge hearts. Tabish loves what you said, among others. And I'll go to Miyako.
Because I'm the bleeding heart.
Well, that's
No,
that.
I agree. Like maybe the progress is slow, but I see a huge difference, since when we started and now. But I think we will continue to have conflicting morals and,
Yes.
ethical issues. What I commit to is to provide a safe place for people to have dialogues and discussions. I think that's ultimately how we get everybody educated and be on the same page, can be brave and have, like these conversations. Like that's what I commit to, like in, like bringing this to a better place.
Graham.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So many good points have been made. Thank you to my fellow panelists. I think the message that came out, I think Mike's comment about thinking globally but acting locally is at the very heart of it. I think we have to recognize that there isn't one solution here. And I think we need to recognize different interests, different cultures, different backgrounds. And we need to be sympathetic and understanding to that. I think the most important thing that we can do as individuals is role model the right behavior, the appropriate behavior. Again, to come back to Mike's point, if we have to explain to our families, if we have to explain to people how and why we are doing things, then we should certainly be challenging ourselves. I think the one word that I wrote down as I was just thinking about this final summing up was this idea of listening. And we need to be able to listen. We need to listen to the people we're working with. We need to listen to ourselves in the community. And most importantly, we need to find a way of listening, really listening to the horses that we're working with.
Thank you. Thank you. And before thanking all of you, I just want to again thank Pebbles and the Board of Horses and Humans for creating a space to have the dialogue, Miyako, that you welcome and talk about. And it was a pleasure hearing from all of you, working with you, and back to you, Pebbles.
Thank you, panelists. I think you can tell by the chat that everyone appreciates your insight and value that you have brought to this discussion. And I appreciate all of you too for joining in this discussion. I'd like to have a continuation. That's why we put together a little questionnaire. If you would take a few minutes, it's not long. So if you could fill it out so we know where to go from here about this discussion. So again, we appreciate your support with Horses and Humans Research Foundation and our education component. We're here, like Emily has suggested, about connecting and sharing. So because we're going to do a better job if we can work together about this topic. So thanks again.